Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our June webinar with the Hermosa Beach Historical Society and Museum. This is an extra special webinar tonight as it marks the finale of our virtual lecture series. That's right, folks, we're planning to resume our in-person lectures back at the museum starting this summer. You heard it here first. I would also like to mention that the museum is now open for guests Wednesdays through Sundays from 2 to 4, so please stop by, say hello. We also just opened a new student-curated exhibition titled Skateboarding Then. It's all vintage skateboarding photos from the South Bay. Super cool. Come check it out. And then for tonight's program, I'm thrilled to introduce our three really fantastic panelists. First up, we have the dynamic Ann Williams of @ Street Parking Hermosa. Ann is a South Bay native, realtor, lawyer. She does it all. Full-time mom, everything. Is there anything you don't do?
I don't do anything well, apparently.
And you're often seen skateboarding around Hermosa Beach, taking pictures of interesting cars. And you even have someone even documented you doing this, and you're going to show that in your presentation.
Oh, way to spoil it. Thanks, JV. No, kidding.
And then following Ann, we're going to learn more about the history of the automobile industry in LA with Tom Zimmerman, who's the author of several books on local and Southern California history. Tom, where can we find your books?
It's all on Amazon, and if you have an actual bookstore somewhere by you, it's Angel City Press, and their stuff is in every bookstore that's still around.
Hey, there we go. And then we're going to end our presentation with Alec Carlson, who is a South Bay native collections manager at the Automobile Driving Museum. Alec has strong family roots and a generations-long love of cars, and we're looking forward to taking a sneak peek in your garage where you are right now and getting to see what the next generation of car fanatics are up to. So with all that said, oh yeah, and Alec, how big is your garage again?
It sits behind my house, and it, on a good day, will fit 8 cars in it, and it's 2 stories tall. So it's quite the shop.
Okay, so there's something to look forward to hang on for, folks. With all that being said, I'm going to pass the baton over to Ann. The screen is all yours, and you're already up and ready to go. So myself and the other panelists, we're going to mute ourselves, turn off our cameras, and we will see you later on.
Okay. Thank you, Jamie, for the introduction and also for your really excellent coordination for tonight's presentation. I just want to say the Historic Society is really fortunate to have you, and you've been a pleasure to work with. And before I begin, I want to do a public service announcement. So I'm going to be talking about community tonight, and the Historic Society is tasked with documenting and celebrating ours. So this event was free to you, but they need our support to continue these kinds of offerings. So please consider becoming a member or volunteering or making a donation, because every bit helps. Okay, there we go. Good evening, I'm Ann Williams. And to get us oriented, I want to start off with a little math and put our other panelists and myself in context. My role tonight is automotive paparazzo, which I will explain. And we also have Tom Zimmerman here to educate us about LA's automobile industry and production history. And then we'll wrap it up with Alec Carroll, a car community participant who will give us a tour of his restoration empire. So about me, I'm a South Bay native. I'm a real estate consultant professionally, and slightly embarrassing confession, I skateboard like a lot. Mostly I'm skateboarding in what I call my skate shed, which is about a 2 or 3 mile radius around my house. And this is how I find so many cars, because I'm trolling every street and alley and spotting them in the crevices. I take all my photos on my iPhone, but still nothing in my background is screaming car person. So how did these attributes coalesce into what I call an automotive paparazzo? Well, I started taking photos of cars in my neighborhood after I went to Cuba in 2017. So I love architecture and buildings dripping with old world charm. And on my first day in Havana, I was so excited to see all these decrepit buildings, but I kept getting photobombed by these big old brightly colored cars. So it took me about an hour to realize that the cars were bringing to life what would otherwise be cold, static scenes. So I was suddenly doing street photography, but with a focus on cars instead of people. And the photos just got a lot more interesting. And you can see how deeply ingrained the cars are into the Cuban people's lives. So here we have a wedding. Here's a quinceañera. I went to the big cemetery, and what did I find? A pink Russian Lada. More cars. So let's leave Cuba and let me explain how I came to be speaking to you tonight. I grew up in Palos Verdes, and I always loved Hermosa's kind of funky, beachy vibe. When I was a kid, it was more about biker bars and just kind of humble beach bungalows. And I realized how much it's changed in the past 20 years that I've lived here. So my original intent in doing the photo series was to use cars as a thematic kind of through line. Kind of a lens through which to document the city's evolving neighborhoods. And the car was more of a way to add a layer of interest to the background that was the real object of my attention. So artistically, I was composing a vignette. And I like dive bars and people with scars and things with a patina. So I was aiming for a vintage vibe when I started taking pictures of cars. So many of the cars I've shot are in really immaculate condition. But my favorite subject is an old car that looks like it's been ridden hard and put away wet. Something that has a story to tell. And if I can document kind of old Hermosa in the background, that's a bonus. So now it's 2018 and I'm skateboarding around with an iPhone in my pocket, and I want to do a photo series that will document the changing face of my neighborhood. And I've been influenced by my recent trip to Cuba. So do you ever notice how once something's on your radar, it's seemingly everywhere you look? So when we got home, I realized that this kind of Cuba car lives 100 feet from my house. And I had passed it a million times, but I never really appreciated it until I saw the celebration of cars in Cuba. I mean, really, how many cars do you know that can pull off not one, but 3 flags? So I saw there's something special, kind of a celebrity quality about my neighbor's car. And then I couldn't stop seeing these special cars all around me. So a paparazzo is defined as a freelance photographer who pursues celebrities to get photographs of them. And this is what I started to do, but my subjects are cars. So here's my embarrassing shot. The hunter becomes the hunted. One of my subjects snapped me standing on top of a trash can in the middle of downtown Hermosa on a Friday evening when all the normal people were going to dinner with their loved ones. And I wonder why my 12-year-old sons are embarrassed by me. Okay, moving along. Here's who took that picture. Hi, Eric. So I started posting these shots just on my kind of personal Instagram account, just kind of mixed in with all my other photos. But then I realized that people were really interested in the cars. So I split it off into its own account that I called Street Parking Hermosa. And I figured I'd post 1 or 2 shots a week, because really, how many cool cars can there be when I'm out skateboarding and running errands? So I don't really like to photograph the car meetups in the parking lots, because I like to find my subjects in the wild. So to me, taking a picture of a car, taking a picture of a car meetup would be like a nature photographer taking photos of lions in the zoo. I want my lions running on the savannah, or at least like sleeping under a tree. I want them in context. So in taking all these photos, I started to interact with the car owners, and I discovered that there's not just a car culture, but really this rich, deep community. So what is a community? A community is a group of people with a common characteristic or interest living together within a larger society. And in every community, people have different roles. So if Tom is our historian and Alec is our working participant, then the role I've fallen into in the car community is an observer and a documentarian. And I would estimate I make contact with about a third of the subjects of my pictures. So doing the math on my 3,000 photos, that's close to 1,000 people I've interacted with in the past 3 years. And for an extrovert like me, taking pictures of someone's car and then asking them about it is the perfect way to initiate a conversation. And in doing this, I've learned that every car has a story. Or more accurately, maybe every person has a story about a car. So I'm certain that each of you could tell me about a car that was important to you at some point. And in telling me that story, you're going to share very personal things, and we're going to walk away from a brief conversation having connected in a really meaningful way. Whether you're going to tell me about the car, that the car is something that's been restored with your kids as a family project, or it's the car that you've had since high school, or the car you got in your divorce, or the car that caused your divorce. I love hearing all these stories. So if you see a lady standing on top of a trash can or lying in the sidewalk or darting through traffic to stand in the median on Pierre Avenue, now you know what's going on. So my favorite comment is when someone notices me taking a picture of a car and says, you know, there's a dude who already does that, and he has a whole Instagram series. Well, that dude is me. Don't be shy. Say hello. I told you that the Instagram series is called Street Parking Hermosa, and here's my contact information. And I will close by telling my car story. So if I'm not on my skateboard, you will see me tooling around town in this 1976 450 SL, which was my dad's. For more than 30 years, he drove this car every day from his house in Palos Verdes to his office in Riviera Village. He bought it from a small dealership that used to be on PCH and First Street in Hermosa. And I wasn't looking for a classic car, but when he couldn't drive anymore and it came up for sale, I was determined to outbid my sisters for the privilege of owning the car that I wasn't allowed to drive when I was in high school. So I cannot tell you the joy I get, not only from driving the sunny convertible, but also the nonstop smiles and the nice comments I get. I call it my automotive antidepressant. But the very best thing is when someone actually recognizes the car and asks if I bought it from Dr. Samuelson. So this starts another beautiful human interaction where we reminisce about my dad. So with that sappy story, I'm going to hand it off to one of my favorite people, my friend and LA historian, Tom Zimmerman, to speak to you about the Historic Society's focus, which is history. Take it away, Tom.
Okay, let's see. Where is the, let's see. Here we go. Okay, it's working. Alrighty, so what I'm going to talk about is Detroit on the Pacific, which is the last thing anybody associates with Los Angeles, obviously, because Los Angeles in the late 19th century and into the early 20th century was just another agricultural county seat, like 1,000 other agricultural county seats spread all over the Western United States. We amounted basically to nothing until the Chamber of Commerce was founded in 1888. And they were founded because two railroads, the Southern Pacific in 1876 and the Santa Fe in 1886, came in and connected us to the Transcontinental Railroad. So for the first time, people could easily get into Los Angeles, not having to take wagon trains for months to get out here. And that changed everything. And the Chamber of Commerce, because there was a very large boom in the 1880s, they wanted to keep it going. So they sold the city of Los Angeles like a box of cereal. And one of the single most ubiquitous image that they sold was the citrus trees in the foreground and the snow-covered mountains in the background, obviously pushing the unique topography and climate that you would find in Southern California. Now, we could do this because you literally could go in the surf in the morning and skiing in the afternoon if you had a good car. You literally could do that. The highest point in the entire bug-ridden state of Florida is 345 feet. So Florida had to rely on beautiful women in bathing suits picking oranges to promote their orange groves. We had snow-covered mountains. And this is what started the promotional campaign for people coming out here. But if you are going to have a for real 20th century city, you simply had to have a harbor. And the great natural harbors were in San Diego and San Francisco. We had these mud flats down in San Pedro that you couldn't bring the ship in close. You had to bring what they called lighters, which were smaller ships out to the big ships, load all the stuff onto the lighters, and then bring them in. Very time-consuming, very expensive. So they chased after the federal government to make us a harbor. And these are the mud flats in San Pedro that will eventually become what is now the biggest harbor, really the busiest harbors in the world, certainly in the US. Long Beach at the top, San Pedro at the bottom, and that's the Cerritos Channel. And right in the middle is the Badger Avenue Bascule Bridge. And it will eventually be replaced by what my grandfather in the Navy called the Singing Bridge, because it made all this noise as you went over it, a much larger, more impressive bridge. And right next to it, down here and kind of in the bottom, below the Bascule Bridge, is where the USS Ticonderoga was anchored. And my grandfather always said the Ticonderoga was the greatest ship in the Navy, Tommy. 77 decks and a glass bottom. And you could look through the glass bottom and see the fishes swimming around under the ship, the Ticonderoga. And it was anchored right there. At least my grandfather said so. And I certainly always saw it. So this becomes the harbor. So now we're connected to the world. We were connected to the rest of the US by the railroads. Now we're connected to the world because we have an actual, honest to God, harbor. So comes World War I. And in World War I, we had about 26,000 troops from Los Angeles County in the Army. And we donated a lot of oranges and stuff, agricultural things, to the war effort because we had no industry, none. So the Chamber of Commerce took it upon itself to start industry, to try and draw established industries out to Los Angeles. And the first one they were successful with was Goodyear Tire and Rubber. And this, going across the top of the photograph there is Central Avenue. So this is well south of the major city. And you can see this is 1919 when they were building the plant, and it's farmland. This is all farmland around it. 8 years later, and that's what it looks like. The 1920s was insane in terms of how Los Angeles grew, just crazy. And it was due to the work of the Chamber of Commerce luring all these people out here by making Los Angeles as impressive as it could be. And one of the lures was now there was places to work. You had these huge industrial plants. And after Goodyear was established, you very rapidly got Firestone. And when Firestone was established, you got Goodrich. And they all joined the Sampson Tire Company, which was native to the region. But within a few years, Los Angeles was second only to Akron, Ohio, as the tire producing city in the whole country. We eventually become the second glass producing city in the country. And all of this because of automobiles. And automobiles were first produced here by Ford, making Model Ts in a very small factory in 1911. And these are all sitting down in the central manufacturing district, where they are ready to be sent off on trains to the rest of the country. So first off, we're making Model Ts, and this is where they were made. The Ford Motor Plant at 777 South Santa Fe Avenue. And it was a major plant, and they made Model Ts and shipped them over to the Central Manufacturing District, where they would be sent out on trains all over the place. That was replaced in 1930 by this plant, this is the Bascule Bridge, the Badger Avenue Bridge, which became Ford Boulevard in San Pedro in honor of the new plant. And the new plant could produce a lot more efficiently than the old guy. The old plant recently has been rehabilitated, which is kind of interesting, by the Warner Music Group. And that's their headquarters it's just slightly east of the rest of downtown, that manufacturing business district there. But this is the new plant. The old one was largely closed by Ford, and all of the manufacturing was moved into the new guy. Now, it was closed 32 to February of 34, of course, because of the Depression. And one of the things that reopened it is because they needed to make a ton of trucks to construct Hoover Dam. And this is where a lot of those things were made. And as the Depression eased up a little bit, they, of course, started making cars in the Ford plant again. And this is the interior of the Ford plant, where they started out making Model A's. The Model T's were east of the downtown area. The Model A's were down in San Pedro. And here they're putting the hoods on the Model A's in the Ford factory. And Studebaker soon joined them. And this is 1936 in the Studebaker factory in Vernon. It was very rapid in terms of the number of factories that opened. By the end of the 1930s, we are second only to Detroit as a car manufacturing city in that short time, because Willys Overland comes out here in 1929. Chrysler comes out in 1932, Studebaker in 1938. Ford opens a new plant in Maywood in 1948. General Motors came out in 1936 over in Southgate and built Chevrolets, Buicks, Oldsmobiles, Pontiacs, and Cadillacs. It was the first of the General Motors factories that built a variety of types of cars. The ones back east were all kind of specialized factory by factory. And then General Motors opens the enormous plant out in Van Nuys in 1947. Nash and American Motors comes out in 1948. So you had these plants, these automobile plants, all over the Southern California area, with the cars being shipped out by trains and by ships as the overseas markets grew. And Los Angeles was in the perfect place for that. And it was one of the lures to bring people out here, because the Chamber of Commerce thinking was, if you're going to bring all these people out here, they got to have a job. And so this is one of the things that they did. They lured the car industry, because this was the biggest per capita car ownership city in America since like 1915. I mean, right from the jump, cars really sold in Southern California. And one of the things that allowed this in the later 30s and the 40s was, of course, the Hoover Dam. Because the building of the Hoover Dam gave Los Angeles far more power than it needed. It couldn't use it all. And it's one of the reasons, excuse me, that the industrial base of the city grew so crazily, because you had all this very, very cheap power coming to Los Angeles by way of the Hoover Dam. And we not only had the major car industry making the chassis and all that type thing. Here we have Los Angeles made products supply world markets. And this is the United States Spring and Bumper Company. And so they, of course, had the spring systems and the bumper systems that were sent over to the car factories to be put in the cars as they were being built. And all this was made locally. It's that Topsy thing. The industry just kept growing and growing and growing until you had all of these subsidiary type companies feeding into the main companies, to Ford and General Motors, et cetera. And then you started to get the things like the Crown Carriage Company, to where you would buy the basic Ford and then they would make the Carriage, Young's Market, as you can see, to put on the back of it. So that was a whole nother industry that came out of the car industry, is to create these trucks and these delivery vehicles. And one of the other great things that came out of that was the good old Airfloat Company, which was on East 7th Street from 1930 to 1957. And they made these trailers. So besides the major car industry, the Model A's and the Model T's and all that stuff, you had all the subsidiary stuff that went along with it. So the car industry became huge in Los Angeles, not just for making the finished product, but for making all the parts that went into the finished product. And then, of course, along comes World War II. And World War II could not have been more different in Southern California than World War I. As I said previously, there were 21,761 sons of Los Angeles County that went to the military, various branches of the military, and then some agricultural stuff. And that was about it. By World War II, we were second only to Detroit as a manufacturing city. That's in like 20 years. And it's the work of the Chamber of Commerce that brought all these companies out here, found people to go work in them because they lured them out here as well. And we became a major component of the war effort in World War II, to where in World War I, we were just, making oranges. And this is an M5 tank that was produced at the Chrysler plant out in Southgate. And it was, when they put it in the actual battlefield, this thing was underpowered, a very small weapon on the thing. It was just not what we needed. So they developed the good old Sherman. And the Sherman tank was certainly not the greatest tank of World War II, but there were so many of them. That was the great benefit of the American war effort. You had the American home front that was creating the weapons of war, the food to feed everybody, and you had a gazillion of these tanks, and they were easily fixed. That was the other thing. The German tanks were great tanks, but they were incredibly technically complex and very difficult to fix if something went wrong. The Sherman was like a Chrysler. You just fixed the engine and fixed whatever part wasn't working, and boom, off it went again. Just a phenomenal thing, and partially because of the incredible numbers. And so many of them came out of Los Angeles here in the old Chrysler plant in Vernon. or Southgate rather. And one of the other points that was made in this thing, more than 50% of the total material cost of the tank come locally. Again, it's that parts system. All those parts were created here locally, which made more jobs, which made the thing cheaper to build because you had all the parts. You didn't have to ship them in from Detroit someplace. Now, one of the other things that Franklin Roosevelt wanted very badly was shipping. This was the last large ship made in San Pedro in Southern California. And as you can see, it's the great and glorious SS Catalina, the great white steamship that went every day to Catalina Island, 26 miles off the coast. And as you can see, the thing is jammed with people. They had dance bands, they had all this stuff. And if your dad told you to come down by the little boat level so that you could see flying fish. And my dad was a North Dakota farm kid, so he was not given to flights of fancy, shall we say. And I didn't know what the heck I was really going to see, but obviously fish couldn't fly. But sure enough, there they were, fish with little wings that would jump out of the water and cruise for a couple of feet and back into the water. So all you young men watching this thing, trust your dads, even when they tell you something fantastic. But this is just one of the great ships ever, supposedly carried more people than any other ship in history as it plowed back and forth to Catalina every day. And that was it. In 1924 until 1940, when President Franklin Delano Roosevelt went to his good buddy, that's part of the problem with this is getting old and not having a memory. Henry Kaiser, there we go. He went to his buddy, Henry Kaiser. Henry Kaiser was the head of the so-called 6 companies, and it was the 6 companies that built the Hoover Dam. So he wanted, he wanted lots and lots of, Roosevelt did, lots and lots of cargo ships built. And no cargo ships had been built like ever in Los Angeles. There was no background for it, none. But Kaiser, if he could build the Hoover Dam, he could figure out how to build Liberty ships in Los Angeles, and that's exactly what he did. He built these yards on Terminal Island, and it was second only to one other yard in Marin County in terms of the number of ships. 467 of these cargo ships were built in Los Angeles at Terminal Island. And why is that a big deal? That's a big deal because the war fronts were thousands of miles away from America, lucky for us. So you had to get all this equipment, all this food, all these guys over to the war front, and you needed tons of cargo ships. And they were built right here in a now very industrial Los Angeles. And one of the problems is you needed to have people to build the fool things. Well, there was no kind of background for that in Los Angeles. We hadn't built ships. So what do? You train people. And these are a bunch of brand new welders. And you can see they're all women. And the term for them was Wanda the Welder. And you can see why Rosie the Riveter is the one that got all the ink. Because Rosie could wear, some nice pants and a blouse and have lipstick and stuff. Poor Wanda the Welder was underneath all of the stuff because she spent her life welding on these Liberty ships and eventually Victory ships. But here they are being schooled in how you do this because they had no idea. And the single biggest industry in Los Angeles during the war was aviation, by far. This is North American, which is by the airport in Inglewood there. And as you can see, they're dragging out a finished B-25. And they're taking it out to what was called the Sunshine Line. The ship would be built, but it needed to have the instruments put in and various other things. And that would be done outside because it's Southern California. And you could do that stuff outside. And 10 grand represents the 10,000th B-17 that was built. And this was done through what was called production pools, so that the B-17 was a Boeing aircraft, but Douglas also made them, and so did Lockheed. The aircraft companies, in order to make more airplanes, didn't try and keep their secrets. They put everything into a production pool so things could get turned out as rapidly as possible. And you had, one of these is from the Boeing plant in Seattle. One is from the Douglas plant in Long Beach. And one of them is from the Lockheed plant in Burbank. And it's one of the key reasons that the Allies won the war, because we supplied not only our own military, we supplied every other military that was fighting the Axis. The Russians, the British, the French, when they got back into it, everybody was supplied by us, by Liberty ships and Victory ships, partially that were made in San Pedro, and by these aircraft companies that were all over Southern California. And again, we're back at Inglewood at the North American plant. And that, of course, is a B-25. And the fellow standing there in the foreground is the great Jimmy Doolittle. And this was a case of hometown boy makes good. Jimmy Doolittle graduated from Manual Arts High School here in Los Angeles and became one of the great figures in the development of aviation. And he, of course, had the Doolittle raid that bombed Tokyo from aircraft carriers. An extraordinary thing. Didn't do a whole lot of damage, but it sure raised morale. And here he is back at North American to thank the workers for having built the planes that they flew in. He, of course, goes on to, from here, to run the 8th Air Force, the biggest Air Force in the history of the world. And just as a little side note, this is the Angels Gate Lighthouse down in the entrance to San Pedro Harbor, the breakwater. When you think of troops coming home from World War II and knowing they're back in America, you think of them going by the Statue of Liberty in New York. You think of them going underneath the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. Well, the third great note that you were back in America was going by the Angels Gate Lighthouse. So this is one of the most significant structures in all of the post-war history of World War II, because hundreds of thousands of soldiers, sailors, and Marines came by this thing to land in San Pedro and try and find ways to get back to the other 50 states, 49 states. Angels Gate Lighthouse. And this is the poor beleaguered Firestone plant the Goodyear plant down in South Los Angeles. And the Goodyear plant lasted from 1919 until 1979 when it was closed. All of the lights were going out by that time in these great industrial plants in Southern California. Partially it was because of the incredible smog that really shows up for the first time in World War II. And there was a concentrated fight to try and end the thing. And it really put the kibosh on all these industrial plants because obviously they contributed to the pollution. Also, the car plants all started winking out because of the invasion of German and Japanese cars. And eventually, Volvos and every other kind of foreign car really screwed up the American market. So there just wasn't as much of a demand as there had been. And in this case, this is 1980, and I got hired to photograph the Goodyear plant because it was an historic structure, and you get tax savings if you record something that's going to get whacked. And as you can see, they had a signpost for the number of work days left, and now it's down to 0, and then peace for some and hell for others. But this was typical of what happened to industrial Los Angeles. It basically disappeared, as well as the aviation industry, which only hangs on partially here in SoCal. It's just an interesting story. It came in a roar during the 20s, 30s, and into the 40s. Into the 40s, we contributed so significantly to the war effort, and then it just started to peter out partially because of the climate, partially because of the change in the city, partially because of the change in industry in the United States. But now it's pretty much just a memory. So here we go. Okay, so screen sharing has stopped. So that's my little deal. And Alex is amongst us.
Indeed I am.
All righty.
All right. Sounds good. That was fantastic. I actually learned quite a lot from that. What's up, everybody? My name is Alec Carlson. I am the collection manager for the Automobile Driving Museum, where I've worked for the past 15 years. I'm 25, believe it or not. I started out as a volunteer. Anyhow, so I kind of consider myself a participant in car culture and this car community that is kind of a big deal, as we've just learned, in Southern California, and still is today. When I was, probably 3 or so, as most young boys, I was very into Hot Wheels cars and had quite a collection of them. Particular interest in Volkswagen Beetles for whatever reason. I always noticed them in traffic, and living in Hermosa Beach, they're kind of everywhere. So kind of glommed onto those a little bit. And with that, my mother showed me one of the Herbie movies. I think it was the one with Lindsay Lohan, Herbie Fully Loaded. And seeing a car that I thought so much of come to life really kind of solidified my passion for vehicles. So from there, my grandmother, also a Hermosa native, well, not native, but has lived there since 1970. She found this ad for the Automobile Driving Museum. This is back in March of 2011. No, 2007, actually. And she sent my grandfather with me down there to see what it was all about. And we walked in, and there's this giant warehouse full of, at that time, about 70 or 80 vehicles that were the most outstanding looking things I had ever seen. Nothing like Volkswagen Beetles whatsoever. So from there, I became completely addicted. Every weekend, every summer vacation, every opportunity I had, I was down there. So I ended up a volunteer tour guide for years and years. Finally, at the age of, I think, 19, I had kind of created the position of collection manager that didn't really exist because I had devoted so much time to this museum and knew everybody. And so it's been quite a ride. So what I do for the museum as a collection manager, I take care of all of the preservation, some of the restoration for all of the collection vehicles, of which there are about 140 now. I do a lot of the research and publications and exhibits that we have. I manage the display space, the floor sets, how the cars are arranged, what cars are on the floor at any given time, and our Sunday ride program. We kind of dub ourselves the petting zoo of car museum. So as a part of tours, we allow you to sit in the vehicles that are on display. And every Sunday, we take 3 to 4 different vehicles out of the collection and park them out front. And our volunteer drivers will take our customers for rides. So, our oldest vehicle being 1886 and our most modern being 2002, largely American cars, there's quite a variety of things that you can ride in. So if you've not been or you've not heard of us, we're located right in El Segundo. It's definitely worth checking out. So that's a bit about my career with the museum anyhow. So backtrack a little bit. About 5 years into my passion for vehicles, my grandfather made mention that our family has racing history in LA. I'm like, okay, that sounds like something. Why did you wait so long to tell me? So he and I, for the subsequent 2 years, researched it and published a book about it. So my grandfather's uncles, so my great granduncles, back in 1923 in Long Beach, no, it was actually San Pedro, opened a Rio Grande gas station, which kind of got them into the automotive world and industry, so to speak. From there, they befriended a lot of people in their service garage and so forth, and ended up in the racing scene. And at that time in Los Angeles, it wasn't necessarily in LA. It was just everybody that lived in LA into racing. And where they raced was El Mirage Dry Lake, which is a little ways outside of Los Angeles. It's very dry, flat, silk-like desert, perfect for high-speed racing. High speed is a relative term. These are Model Ts and Model As that they were racing. So they got very into that. They moved their business to Main Street in downtown LA, and opened Nick's Auto Parts, or Jim's Auto Parts. And by 1946, they were so involved in racing that they almost fully converted the business into production and manufacturing of high performance engine parts for early flathead Ford V8s. And that kind of lasted all the way through about 1956 and started getting away from flathead stuff and got more into drag racing, which is, if you don't know, two vehicles side by side racing a quarter mile. Whoever gets to the end first wins. So walked away from that a bit. And then it kind of skipped a generation so far as auto industry and our family is concerned. So after my grandfather having mentioned it, I got very into that particular history, and that kind of fully consumed my passion. So now I build race cars, so to speak, hot rods as we call them, in the same style and with respect paid to how my great granduncles would have done it. So with that, I'll take on a little tour of my shop here. Let's see if I can't flip you all around. Forgive me, I'm on my phone here. There we go. So this is my workspace that I have behind my house. It's a fairly decent sized shop. So this is my most recent completed project. It's a 1932 Ford Roadster. It's built in a pre-World War II style. The engine, which is the most notable feature, bears my family's name. These are the parts that they manufactured. And the parts that I have here on this engine are actually original to 1946. But back there is where I do most of my engine building. In fact, I have this photograph of Nick Harrell, who did all the engine building, up here in my toolbox. So he watches me work and makes sure I don't make any mistakes. And we'll walk out here, and I've got a couple more projects lined up in the queue. This is my 1936 Ford Cabriolet. This is actually an Argentinian Ford. It started life as a right-hand drive vehicle, found its way back here to the States. So it is waiting for me to get to it. I have 19 vehicles of my own. This is the most recent project, like I said, but I'm busy over at the museum quite a bit. I'm actually preparing the Roadster over there to go to a race next weekend. I do a lot of nostalgic racing events, pre-1936 vehicles with pre-1955 motors racing the way they used to. This is my 1929 Ford Model A pickup. Believe it or not, I do race this little guy too. Forgive all the parts that are in it that belong to the Cabriolet up there. So, fairly decent sized workspace. I entertain some client cars back here also. I'm in the process actually of getting into remanufacturing the original Harrell heads and intakes like they did back in the day. And here's my daily driver, with the exception of my pickup truck. It's a 1956 Oldsmobile Holiday 88. It's an all original car, original paint and upholstery. Has, I believe at this point, 30-something thousand original miles on it. So quite the vehicle. So, and there's the shop that I'm very, very fortunate to have behind my house. My folks bought this house in Redondo in 1994, not expecting me to get into cars, but I guess it all added up well. They've always been fully supportive, so very grateful for that. And with that, that is kind of the gist of it. That is what I do. That is who I am. Let's see here. There we go. All righty, I'll hand it back to you, Jamie.
Hey, everybody. All right. Tom, you can unmute and you can come back. Oh my gosh, that was really great. Okay, everyone, we're going to do a Q&A. So if you guys have any questions, pop them down in the box. But first, I have a comment for each of you that I was scribbling down frantically. And I know that picture of your dad's car, that's actually my favorite picture you've taken, partially because I just love the color of the car, but also the old surfboard shop sign in the back that was exposed like during that building being under renovation. And that's one of my favorite like things to look for in your photos are the little kind of like details that are just there for that fleeting moment. You've really documented so much of like Hermosa history with houses that are no longer there, businesses that are no longer there, things that were just there briefly. And so that's my favorite photo. And then Tom, I love the photo that you included of the B-17s, the Flying Fortress. My grandfather flew that plane in World War II, so that was kind of a cool thing for me to see. I've never seen that before. Well, I mean, I've seen photos of the planes, but I haven't seen that specific photo. So it was really neat. And then Alec, oh my gosh, your Oldsmobile is stunning. How long have you had that car now?
Well, that actually, believe it or not, used to be a museum car. It was donated to us by the original owner's nephew. And the museum decided to part ways with it. It didn't fit the collection any longer. We had more cars like it that were better. So it came for sale and I could not say no. So that was about 2-3 years ago.
So how old were you when you got your first car that was, just scot-free yours?
I was 13. It was well, I actually still have it. It's in fact on display at the museum, which I saw a comment pop up to say the name of the museum. It's the Automobile Driving Museum. It was a 1937 Ford Deluxe two-door sedan, which was in a garage kind of collapsing around it in El Segundo. And I drove that car all the way through high school and college, and I still drive it quite a lot when I don't have it on display at the museum.
Oh, that's really cool. Okay, and then when did you start learning how to drive then?
I actually learned how to drive when I was 11 on a Model T Ford, of all things, a 1923 Ford Model T.
Of course you did.
I know, it adds up, right?
You guys have any questions for our panelists, put them in the Q&A or the chat box. I'm going to go through, have a lot of comments. So everybody loved your presentation. It was really great. Tom, we're like blown away. You are my future go-to for anything LA history, because that is like such a weak point of mine, which is, super great working for a museum, but didn't cover that in college. Let's see.
Well, as it happens, me and Los Angeles have the same birthday. So I took it as a sign from God.
Somebody, I have a lot of comments actually. Is it okay if I read some of those to you guys? I'll share with the class. Also a note is that the fact that the Japanese car companies imported through the port of Los Angeles and established their U.S. headquarters in the Gardena Torrance area, which is very true. I think Toyota was there until very recently. I mean, recently within the past like 10 years, which is recent for me. Petting zoo of cars. I love that as well, which is so funny because whenever I go to the Automobile Driving Museum, I'm just trying so hard not to touch anything because I don't want to be that person that puts fingerprints on stuff. Because everything's so shiny and nice. I'm just like...
Right. Hey, don't worry about it. Like I said, we're the petting zoo. It's like, pet the animal. Don't rip the fur out of it. Just enjoy yourself. Have fun.
Okay. Yeah. And I'm definitely going to be calling you for the private tour sometime because I definitely want to go back now. When are you guys open?
We are open now, actually. We're open Tuesday through Sunday, 10 to 4.
Okay.
Alec, when did the Automobile Driving Museum open in El Segundo?
We opened in March of 2007. That ad in the newspaper that my grandmother found and notified my grandfather about was its grand opening. So I've been there since day one, essentially, in that location. It existed for about 5 years before that in West LA on Pontiac Street. I
tell people about it all the time. It is such a gem, and it's if I say like if the Peterson Museum is like kind of like the Louvre, you guys are the petting zoo, right? And taking my kids out in the drives on Sundays around. It's just great.
Yep. Tactile experience, which not a lot of car museums can claim.
And it's also a block from In-N-Out. So that's another selling point for the kids.
Yeah, as an El Segundo person, I was very pleased with that In-N-Out being built. It was a really good moment for the community.
You're telling me I smell In-N-Out blown through the front door of the museum every day at 10:30.
Oh, no, you're right there. That's very true. Okay, so we got a couple. Okay, does anyone on this call have any information? The car race held in Redondo Beach in 1914. There is one line in a Redondo Beach history book, but no photos or anything else.
Take it away, Tom.
Just kidding. That one I don't know about, but if you notice that original photo for the building of Goodyear, right above it was an auto place where they held races. They must have had 5 of those scattered around Southern California. There was a huge one in Beverly Hills. They were everywhere because this was the original car city. Right from the jump, people were nuts for cars.
Indeed. There's a documentary, actually. I think, don't quote me, it might be available on Amazon. I have the DVD anyway, so I know you can get it. It's called Where They Raced. And it is specifically about Los Angeles racing, every different type of racing, different tracks, where they were. And this goes back to the 19-teens. So I'm not necessarily mentioning that specific race in Redondo Beach in this documentary. However, if you find it, you will see who produced it. He's also an automotive historian. He might know. I don't know his name off the top of my head, unfortunately, but I'm sure that information exists. Unfortunately, I do not have it either.
That's a good one. Someone also mentioned in the comments, Dean Case, thank you, Dean. There's a great book by Harold Osmer that documents all of the racetracks that once populated SoCal. The book is called Where They Raced. There was once a super speedway in Beverly Hills. So,
yeah.
I think the only one local one I know of is my dad always talked about the speedway down on the beach. He used to race his car down there. Was it? I think it's now the Strand. Uh-oh. Mom, you're on the call. Type it in the chat box. Don't remember. And here's a car trivia question. One of my friends, I grew up in PV, worked for Hyundai and was responsible for bringing the brands to the U.S. He said that the first shipment came into the L.A. harbor in the mid-'80s and were accidentally delivered without brakes.
Yeah, Lordy.
I wonder how many cars were in that shipment. That's a huge mess up, right?
Yeah, nice. Not good at all.
Okay.
That was once said actually by Henry Ford. I built my cars to go, not stop. So take that for what it's worth.
Okay. Oh, okay. Thank you, Mom. The speedway your dad raced was in Venice. Thank you, Kathy. And actually, Mom, happy birthday. It is my mom's birthday today.
Happy birthday.
So happy birthday. Thank you for tuning in, Mom. Okay.
So there's a street in Venice called Speedway. That must be what we're talking about.
Is that what it is? Okay.
It's like just one up from the beach parallel.
Probably. Okay. Well, I'm glad we had a realtor here to verify the street. All right. Does anybody else have any questions for any of our panelists? Oh, actually, wait. No, I do have a question in the Q&A box. Okay. Jim Boyd Hermosa recently passed away. Does anyone have contact for his son, Mike Boyd, who races Winged Express?
I do, actually. Yeah. In fact, the original Winged Express that was developed in the early 1960s was developed by my family, Harrell Engines LA, and driven by Willie Borsch. We sold it to Mousy Marcellus in the mid-late 60s, and it's gone on several generations since then, and is now driven by Mike Boyd. Yeah. So I know the owner of the car, which is not Mike. I know Dave Mandela. He's got the car. So could potentially get you guys together.
Okay, very cool.
Can I just pat myself on the back for a second here, because you guys approached me to do this talk and I was like, sure, I take pictures of cars, but I don't know anything about them. So I'm so pleased with myself for enlisting Alec and Tom. They could not have been better. Yay, me.
I agree. Yay, Ann.
You guys are amazing.
I know nothing about cars, but I would really love to learn more. I think it is such a fantastic topic, and you literally see them everywhere in California. We spend most of what was that last quote that people always throw it out once a year to make you feel guilty about your work commute, but they tell you how many days of your year you spend in your car driving if you're an LA person. It's always like a super crazy high number. But yeah, so I think it's nice to drive a nice car, and I think that's why people have always kind of found it important in culture. And thank you everybody for saying happy birthday to my mom. That's very sweet. Okay. Harold Osmer wrote the book Where They Raced, upon which the documentary was made. Okay, very good. The Ascot Park racetrack was at 182nd and Figueroa. It was where Torrance native Parnelli Jones first gained fame before winning the Indy 500. Very interesting. So we're going to have a separate presentation on legal and illegal car racing in LA. That would be fun. I think we have a pretty knowledgeable crowd here about that. So
see if La Tejera Boulevard comes up in Westchester, because you had this huge stretch and guys used to drag there all the time because it dead ended. Very many police around.
Yeah, absolutely. That and Imperial Highway and Hawthorne Boulevard and Lincoln Boulevard, all those big racing spots.
Yeah, my parents always talked about cruising down Hawthorne Boulevard to the A&W past the Witch Stand. I have no idea what any of that means, but there it is.
Witch Stand
Tom,
is there.
Is it still there?
Yeah, it's one of those post-war googie things that has this huge meaningless kind of spire on it, all in neon, of course. It's fabulous.
Okay, I'm gonna have to take a cruise down Hawthorne Boulevard and find it then, because I didn't know it even still existed. It was always just this kind of like weird phrase that lives in my mind's eye, picturing my parents as young people.
Oh, in the 50s, it was like the hottest spot in that whole area. Oh, by far, because it was a drive-in, if I remember right. But the neon, if you like neon, good Lord, it's incredible.
Okay, all right. Oh, yeah. The Portofino Inn in Redondo Beach was the finish for the original coast-to-coast illegal cannonball race. Okay. Very interesting. Oh my gosh. Okay, we have some really knowledgeable people tuned in. I'm going to have to write these names down, and we'll have everybody back for a racing event at some point. I think that would be fun. What do you guys think?
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. That's my family's whole thing. Love me some racing. Let's do it.
Okay, we haven't tortured you too much, Alec. You will come back, right?
Oh, of course. Absolutely. Happy to.
Okay, perfect. And Tom, thank you so much. Again, I reserve the right to email you for all LA history collections. I need to pick up questions. I need to pick up one of your books. Really fantastic. And Anne, this whole thing started because of you. I was actually so scared to talk to Anne. I've been following her on Instagram because Rachel Kupinger showed me your Instagram page like 3 years ago, and I just fangirled, and I'm like, oh my gosh, Anne is too cool. I can't talk to her.
I'm so intimidating, aren't I? the dude that takes all the car pictures. I know.
But it was really funny to come with you, not as a car expert, although like you know more than you're letting on. Absolutely.
Bright spots once in a while.
Like little touches there, and come and hang out with the guys who obviously know quite a bit. So thank you everyone for coming. This was a fantastic finale to our virtual lecture series. We started back in 2020. It's been a long haul. Thank you everybody for coming with us. Make sure that you guys follow Anne at Street Parking Hermosa on Instagram. It's just like some really good like car serotonin for your news feed. If you need to refresh your Instagram feed, definitely make sure that she is on there. You can also follow Alec on Instagram and stay up to date with his like new projects that he's working on, or you could go like stalk him at the museum like I'm planning to do when I have a spare time. And you guys heard it from Tom. You can check out some of his books on Amazon through Angel City Press. And last but not least, head over to the Hermosa Beach Museum website to find out how you can kind of help support us and our mission as we kind of reopen. We are a community-based organization, and one of our like most proud moments, like the ADM, is that we are an accessible museum where we welcome everybody to kind of just come and live their best life and enjoy history. So thank you so much, everyone. I really appreciate you being here. Panelists, mwah, mwah. Love you guys.
This will be on YouTube, right? You'll be able to find this recording of this?
Yes, somebody did mention they want to show this to a friend. This presentation is being recorded, and it will be posted on the Hermosa Beach Museum's YouTube channel over the weekend. If anybody has trouble finding a link, feel free to just send me an email, hermosabeachmuseum@gmail.com. Go on the website, send us an Instagram DM, just bombard me and I'll get back to you when I can. So you can watch it whenever you like.
Thank you.
All right, sound good? Thank you so much for being here, guys. This was really fun. Tom, Alec, I'm gonna call you guys, I promise. And Anne, I know where to find you. I'll just look. I'll just go out and start walking around the streets looking for your little yellow car. So, all right.
Perfect. Anytime.
Thank you, guys. Have a good night. Okay. Bye.
There you go. Take care.